My name is Alyssa. I am a woman in my third year of marriage who has been successfully building her career. My husband, Steve, also works at the same company. I believe that he too was working hard and saving for the future. Since I frequently travel for work and earn a higher salary than him, I've left the savings to him while I take care of our living expenses and daily costs. However, I also have my challenges. One of them is dealing with Steve's parents, my in-laws. They used to live with Steve's sister's family. However, from the beginning, his sister intended to live only with her husband and hadn't planned on living with her parents. Yet, my in-laws insisted that since they were married, it was only natural that they take care of them, and apparently imposed themselves on their daughter and son-in-law. Unable to tolerate their parents' selfishness, Steve's brother-in-law chose to live separately. Not wanting a divorce, Steve's sister decided she would rather live with her husband's parents than her own. And now she is living with her in-laws at their place. I knew about this situation from Steve, but never imagined it would impact our lives similarly. I had never envisioned such a scenario at the beginning of our marriage. Originally, we worked in different departments at the company, and I was a junior to Steve. We would occasionally pass by each other at work. He fell in love with me at first sight and confessed his feelings. Initially, I was wary of him, but I eventually gave in to his persistent approaches, and we started dating. From there, our relationship progressed smoothly, and after his proposal, we got married. He was passionate in his pursuit of me, and he continued to show the same kindness after our marriage. That's what I believed. Since the period from dating to the proposal was short, I expected that we might start a family soon. But it's already been 3 years since our marriage. Yet, there are no signs of a child. Although there's nothing wrong with us, Steve always says, we don't need to think about children right now. Well, I want to have children in my 20s. Steve is relaxed and sees no problem in having them in his 30s. As the risks of childbirth increase with age, I wish he would be more aware of that and consider the risks involved for the one giving birth. However, whenever it comes to children, he says it's not the right time yet and avoids the topic. I never thought that our stagnant life would be disrupted by the involvement of my in-laws. That day came unexpectedly. I was away on a 2-week international business trip. Since we usually keep in touch daily when I'm on business trips, I contacted Steve as usual. Normally, I would receive simple replies like okay, work hard, or thanks. However, this time, he continued to leave my messages unread. Puzzled by what could be happening, I assumed he was too busy to reply. Yet, during this time, an astonishing situation was unfolding back in the US. When I returned from my trip and tried to contact Steve, who had promised to pick me up at the airport, there was no response. With no other choice, I took a taxi back to our apartment. We live in a spacious 5-room apartment, which Steve suggested we choose in anticipation of someday having children. Steve's proposal to rent a large room for the children made me suspicious of his reluctance to actually start a family. When I returned to our floor using our elevator, I saw a familiar woman greeting the neighbors. "What are you doing, mother? Can't you see? I'm making rounds to greet everyone. We've decided to live together from now on." I was speechless. "What do you mean?" Ignoring my question, my mother-in-law entered the house. When I opened the front door, I noticed several pairs of shoes that weren't Steve's. Moreover, I could hear loud laughter coming from the living room. It was unmistakably my father-in-law's voice. At that moment, a terrible premonition crossed my mind. When I went to the living room, I found Steve and his father. They were surprised to see me and fell silent. In a low voice, my father-in-law said, "Steve, wasn't Alyssa supposed to return tomorrow?" "I thought so." "Oh, was it today?" Steve replied, "My travel schedule hadn't changed, so Steve must have mistaken the day of my return." My in-laws looked at me as if I had interrupted a fun party, showing annoyance on their faces. This is exactly why I find them difficult to deal with. They always act so childishly. They insist on having their way and get upset easily if things don't go their way. I didn't want to deal with them, so I asked Steve not to invite his parents over too often right after we got married. Steve had agreed with a smile, but Why are you two here? We thought it would be nice to spend some time just as a family. Right, Steve? Yeah, that's right. You promised to pick me up at the airport? Did you forget because of the party with your parents? I asked. I got the day you were returning wrong. Steve pursed his lips. Even if there was a misunderstanding about the day I was coming back, I had contacted him when I arrived at the airport and before boarding the plane from overseas, saying I'm on my way back now. I made sure to contact you each time, you know? I said. Steve laughed. Oh, come on, you must be joking, and checked his phone. But the phone clearly showed the messages I had sent. Surprised, he turned off his phone. Yet, the fact that he ignored my messages remained. At that moment, my father-in-law made an unbelievable remark. Hey, Alyssa, we're having a family-only party right now. Could you please leave? What? Indeed, the living room was messy with drinks, snacks, pizza scattered around, and garbage. It seemed they were really enjoying their party. However, as the owner of the house, being told to leave as if I were an outsider was something I absolutely could not accept, especially since my father-in-law didn't own this apartment. Shockingly, both my mother-in-law and Steve agreed with him. Right? It's a special family-only party. Could you go out? It's unsettling to think you're in the house. Steve was my husband and knew this apartment belonged to me. I never expected him to treat me as an intruder and ignore me. Yet, Steve said, if Mom and Dad say so, please leave for today. I was outraged by this sudden and rude demand. I was exhausted after a long 2-week business trip. I was looking forward to relaxing at home for the first time in a while, but as soon as I returned, I was told to leave, being an outsider. I never imagined receiving such unpleasant treatment. Excuse me, but I own this apartment. How can you order me to leave? I asked. I was utterly exhausted, no longer had the energy to laugh, and glared at my father and mother-in-law. They seemed unaware that the apartment was in my name. What do you mean? Isn't this apartment Steve's? They asked Steve. Steve, having not told them the truth, stumbled over his words. Well, just when I thought they understood it was my property. My mother-in-law made an unbelievable suggestion. Well then, we'll take this house. What? Steve works at the same company as you, right? His salary is the same, so it makes sense for my son to be the owner of this house. My father-in-law was the first to agree with her suggestion. Indeed, that's a great idea. Then this apartment will belong to Steve, and we won't have to endure impolite remarks like before anymore. It seems my father-in-law felt I was being rude. Despite the unfair treatment I received, they didn't seem to care. I sighed. Shockingly, my husband Steve agreed with his parents. That's true. Hand this apartment over to me, Steve said. Perhaps he said something so bold because he was drunk. But seeing the attitude of these three, my heart broke. I thought, maybe I should move out, file for divorce at this moment, and start anew. And that's exactly what I decided. I had always suspected the close relationship between my parents and Steve. So, I had secretly installed something in our home. That something was a hidden camera. Since I had installed hidden cameras, I should have captured all the selfish actions of my in-laws and husband. Even though they are family, I cannot condone selfish behavior. Since we work at the same place, he should be able to afford to pay the rent for this apartment from now on. Then, why don't you sign the divorce papers and I'll transfer the ownership of the apartment to Steve? I proposed. Initially, Steve seemed surprised by my proposal. However, when his parents said, that's the best thing to do, just get a divorce. And a wife who says such things will only cause trouble in the future, Steve easily agreed, saying, that's true. After receiving my share from our joint savings, I filed for divorce and eventually decided to transfer the apartment to him. I had thought Steve truly loved me since he was very persistent in pursuing me. However, it turned out that his parents were his priority, and I was secondary, and having children was also put on hold. I felt sad, but realized that feeling down because of them was a waste of time and changed my mindset. There was a reason why the timing of letting go of the apartment was good. During a 2-week business trip abroad, I received a proposal to consider an overseas assignment. I had always dreamed of working abroad and wanted to accept immediately, but since I had a family, I decided to think it over and discuss it with Steve. Even if he agreed to live abroad with me, I wasn't sure if he could handle living outside of the US. I was considering discussing this with him, but the incident where he conspired with his parents to kick me out made me reconsider our future. In the end, being told to get out during the party made me realize that if we stayed together, I might always be told to leave. The divorce went through, and I was able to let go of the apartment, which made me decide to move abroad. My company was very supportive of my overseas assignment. I had heard that there had been discussions about an overseas assignment before, but they had given up on me since I had family. After telling them about the divorce and completing the necessary procedures, I moved abroad. Since I received a settlement from Steve, I had no financial difficulties. On the contrary, things might become more difficult for Steve. From now on, he will have to bear the rent and living expenses of $2,000 per month that I had been paying. His parents will probably move into the apartment, and Steve will have to take care of them. A month after the divorce, Steve contacted me. "Alyssa, I have something to ask. Was the rent really $2,000 per month?" "Yes. You wanted a larger room in case we had kids, remember?" I was in charge of the finances, but I clearly told you the rent was $2,000 a month. I thought that included all the living expenses. Steve seemed surprised by the amount of the rent, but since he was still working at the same company, he could afford to pay it. That is, as long as his unemployed parents don't squander it. "Alyssa, I have something to discuss with you. I'm not lending you any money. I haven't even said anything yet. How did you know what I was going to say?" I held my head in disbelief. If he was bringing up a discussion after talking about the rent, it could only be about money. I had heard from Steve's sister, whom I only met once, that his parents were unemployed, moved into their children's home, and freely spent money. At his sister's house, the parents had also stolen money from her well-paid husband and squandered it. Such people would definitely try to steal money, even from their own son. They might even use his credit card without permission. We are divorced. We're strangers now, so there's no reason for me to lend you money. If you need money, borrow it from someone else. But I have to pay it back if I borrow from others. I frowned. Maybe he thought he wouldn't have to pay it back if he borrowed it from me. No way. That's unacceptable. And I cannot forgive such behavior. I thought I couldn't lend him a penny. Anyway, I can't give you any money. Then, just return all the money you got for the property division. That was earned by me, so it's mine, right? That money was from the savings you made while I paid the rent and living expenses during our marriage. It's joint property, not all yours. What, really? I understood just how selfish the man I had married was on the day I returned from my business trip, but he still seemed to be surprised. Then, "I'll demand compensation from you." "What? You kept quiet about the rent. You must have planned to burden me with $2,000 to push for a divorce." "The rent is proof." I let out a big sigh at his absurd claim. "What plan? When I returned from my business trip, you were ignoring my messages and hosting a party with your parents in the apartment. It was you and your parents who said to hand over the apartment, not me." "That's true, but I didn't want to bring up this topic, but it was clear that Steve was trying to extort money from me, so I pointed out a certain fact. If we're going to talk about compensation, it would make more sense for me to demand it from you." "What? You're demanding compensation from me? Why would you do that? I divorced you just like you wanted. The fact that you agreed to the divorce and that you were having an affair while I was abroad are two separate issues." "An affair?" "Yes. When I returned from my 2-week trip, there were not only my in-laws' shoes at the entrance, but also those of a young woman. There was definitely someone else there. At that time, I was suspicious because my in-laws insisted so persistently that I leave the apartment. However, recalling the woman's shoes, I realized that there had to be a woman in the apartment, and they had been partying together. Even though no one was supposed to be there, I saw the bathroom light on, which clearly indicated that someone else was present. Steve's affair was acknowledged by his parents, and they tried to rush me out to prevent me from discovering their son's infidelity because I had returned earlier than expected. Fortunately, I had installed hidden cameras just in case, and I caught everything on tape. Your affair partner looks like a newbie at our company. I've already reported it to the company. Plus, the cameras have captured all the evidence of your affair, so you're finished. It can't be. Why would you tell the company? Well, it's impossible to keep working together when my husband is having an affair with someone from the same company. I'm overseas, so it doesn't affect me anymore. An office affair is clearly a violation of compliance. He could be demoted or, in the worst case, fired. I had wanted to avoid the hassle, so I hadn't demanded compensation, but I might reconsider if he continues to cause trouble. If you beg me for money again, I'll claim compensation. With that, he started crying and hung up the call. After that, I received no further contacts from Steve. Since I had never exchanged contact information with my in-laws, they didn't contact me either. Since my in-laws acknowledged the affair, they probably aren't worried about the young woman still working at the same place. Even after my divorce from Steve, sometime after the affair came to light, both Steve and his affair partner left the company. Maybe he didn't want to stay at a workplace with his ex-wife, or perhaps the cold stares from others drove him away. Steve's affair partner, realizing he wasn't wealthy and that his parents were unemployed, ran away as the situation worsened. Even though she ran away, she wasn't unscathed, as I had informed her fiancé about the affair. Surely, she is facing some difficulties now. It seems Steve has left the apartment with his unemployed parents. Having quit his job, he likely couldn't afford to keep paying the monthly rent of $2,000. They are currently living with relatives, disliked, but all three are apparently working. While working overseas, I met a wonderful person, and I am now in a happy relationship. He is very kind, and I have a good relationship with his parents, relieved that I won't experience the same troubles as with Steve. From now on, I want to enjoy my life with peace of mind.